Hi, this is Frid from the Joy of Syntax and English in Color. In the last two videos, I talked about clause elements and also the predicate appositive. In one of the videos, I gave you an introduction to clause elements and main clause patterns, and in the other video, I showed you the different terminologies that are floating around in English departments and cause a lot of confusion and a sense of overwhelm. And now I want to introduce you to syntax in action. I want to take a very well-known sentence, the first sentence from Jane Austen's novel, Emma, and I want to show you that what I have discussed with you so far is already enough in order to do a very nice analysis of that sentence and in order to use that analysis as a springboard that lead to considerations of style and actually creative writing. And as you might have guessed, I prepared a PowerPoint and I'm going to share my screen now and get to it. Here it is. Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and a happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. Oh, let me get myself out of the way. I hope that this will be picked up by the recording. What have we here? Okay, we have the subject, and then a main clause, and then another main clause, and the second main clause contains 1, 2, 3 adverbials. And the bit in between the subject and the first finite verb form consists of two elements, namely two predicate appositives, handsome, clever, and rich, and that's an adjective phrase consisting of 3 adjectives, and then with a comfortable home and happy disposition is a prepositional phrase. And so Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and she had lived. The second main clause displays ellipsis, and that's okay because the subject of the first and the second clause is the same, and so we can leave it out in the second sentence clause. Sorry. And the second clause has 3 adverbials in a row. Had lived nearly 21 years. For how long? In the world, where, and with very little to distress or vex her. I'm going to say more about that, but I want to move on to the next slide. And on this slide, as you can see, I have put into gray the elements that are not obligatory parts of the main clauses. Remember that predicate appositives are second predicates. They are non-finite or verbless predicates that have been placed alongside of the finite predicates. And here we see the sentence is actually syntactically complete without the gray elements. Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. What does that mean? When you look at it more closely, you will see that handsome, clever, and rich, and with a comfortable home and happy disposition were some of those blessings of existence that Emma Woodhouse had. And so the predicate appositive, the 2 predicate appositives provide more detail that make us see or understand what the blessings were. And I want to remind you that the predicate appositives look like clause elements, and they can be treated as clause elements, but they are more movable than regular clause elements. And in some way, they seem like substructures because they are non-finite or verbless, but in a way, they have the status of coordinate elements. They are just important, and in some cases more important than the main clause material, but they couldn't appear without a main clause because they don't have a finite verb. I will come back to this issue time and time again. So what is the question we have to ask is, what kind of a sentence do we have here? We can either call it simply a compound sentence because it consists of two main clauses, or we can say that it's a compound complex sentence because substructures are contained in it. And that's also an issue that people disagree on. What exactly is a simple clause? In traditional grammar, anything is a simple clause that just contains one proposition, and proposition, not preposition. And as soon as you have more than one proposition, be it in the way of a predicate appositive or a defining relative clause, then you already have a complex sentence on your hand. And in modern grammars, like with Quirk and Longman, a sentence is simple as long as it has one finite verb form. So I hope you see that you can disagree on a whole lot of issues, but ultimately when it just is a case of, or when we just want to appreciate what a sentence is, or what the components of the sentence is, and how we can play with it, then it doesn't really matter whether we call it compound or complex. What I have done here is I've gone the first step towards dissecting it. I've just rearranged the sentence in such a way that we see its different components. We see our subject here, we see the first predicate appositive, we see the second predicate appositive, we see the first main clause, the coordinating conjunction, and the second main clause. And I would like to point out two more things. With the comfortable home and happy disposition is a prepositional phrase, obviously, and it's functioning as predicate appositive. With very little to distress or vex her is also a prepositional phrase, and here it functions as adverbial of manner. Now, this points to something very, very important. We often have to distinguish between form and function. Now, when we evaluate a sentence, we, of course, cannot distinguish between form and function in a way. A sentence is created by everything that's in it. The words, the meaning, the structures. They, in concert, create what is in front of us, create this room, this virtual room into which we step and into which we bring ourselves. But still, when we analyze it, sometimes we can look at things from a formal perspective, and sometimes from a semantic perspective, and sometimes from a syntactic, functional perspective. And that makes a whole great sense when we want to understand elements that we can manipulate and that we ourselves can learn to use. And so I would like you to see that when we see structures without context, like with very little to distress or vex her, all we can say is what they are. And in this case, prepositional phrases. And we know that prepositional phrases can be restrictive modifiers and free modifiers, and I'll talk about what that is in another video, and I talk about that in my book. And they can be clause elements, and they can be adverbial, or they can be adjectival. And we can't say anything about the function if we do not have the context. And when we do have the context, we can sometimes disagree. But ultimately, I want to actually not be in a realm where we fight about what to call things. I want to call things by names in order to be able to understand how good writing happens, or how bad writing happens, or how writing happens that pleases us in order to get away from good or bad, or how writing happens that we consider successful. And in order to get a feel for a sentence, in order to appreciate what it does for us, or to us, or with us. So here, that was that. And the other thing I wanted to say is, look at this. This prepositional phrase consists of the preposition with And then we have a noun phrase, a comfortable home, a conjunction, and another comfortable home. So we have a compound noun phrase following the preposition. Comfortable home. Now, with comfortable home and a happy disposition, of course, it's important whether someone has a home or not and whether that's comfortable or not. But the comfortable somehow in this phrase here is not as needed as the happy. Everybody has a disposition, and then the kind of disposition is very important. Does someone have a happy disposition or not? Now, the happy is more important for the disposition here, for this noun phrase, than the comfortable is for the home. Do you understand what I mean? So she had a home and she had a disposition, doesn't work. She had a home and she had a happy disposition, would work. Do you see what I mean? It's that disposition somehow demands an adjective, a modifier, more urgently than does home. So having a home is a lucky thing. Having a comfortable home is a fantastic thing. And with disposition, that everybody has a disposition, that's a given. And then the question is, what kind of disposition does the person have? Okay, the next step in dissecting or in useful dissection is that we turn each preposition into a simple clause or sentence in this case. Remember, a clause is a structure that has a subject and a finite predicate, and a sentence is a structure that appears between two end punctuation mark or a capital letter and an end punctuation mark. And it is important to distinguish between them because there are one-word sentences, but there are not one-word clauses. So Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. She was handsome, clever, and rich. She had a comfortable home and happy disposition. She had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. And when you look at this, the scraggly underlining indicates the head of the phrases. And this dotted underlining here indicates the head of the noun phrase that's contained in the prep phrase. So with very little to distress or vex her is the prep phrase, consisting of the preposition with and the noun phrase very little to distress or vex her. Little is a noun here. Little can be an adjective, but here it is a noun, and it is post-modified by this compound infinitive phrase, to distress or vex her. Okay, now I would like you to look at the use of the verb seem. Seem is a link verb, sometimes also referred to as a linking verb or a copular verb. And I would like you to appreciate the difference between the link verb and another main verb. Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. This use of the link verb here actually indicates a certain narrative stance or attitude towards what's being said. Emma Woodhouse united some of the best blessings of existence. That is a statement that suggests that the speaker is sure of what she's saying. In her opinion, or in his opinion, what is being said is presented, or the proposition is presented as a fact. In her opinion, Emma Woodhouse did unite those blessings of existence when we go with this sentence. But with seemed, we have the strong feeling that appearances and reality might not coincide. Appearances might be deceiving. So the use of this link verb, seem, sets us up for an expectation that somehow something was not perfect, and so we're made curious to hear where the appearance is not in sync with actual reality. And remember that appearance and reality and fact and truth are all relative. So when we use the simple present tense, we denote that something is a fact, but of course, what we consider a fact might not be a fact for someone else. And another thing I would like you to remember is that possess can, unite can mean possess. So she possessed some of the best blessings of existence, or had some. That would be another way of putting it. And a little curious fact, Webster's Unabridged Dictionary does not deal with link verbs. They consider the authors or makers of Webster's Unabridged present to be and seem as intransitive verbs. So their categorization system looks different from mine. I showed you this table where we have intransitive verbs, transitive verbs, and link verbs. And according to Webster's Unabridged, there are only intransitive verbs and transitive verbs. It doesn't make a difference ultimately, because seem is seem, regardless of whether you call it a transitive or intransitive or copular verb. But I would like you to take note that once again, different people deal with things differently, and it doesn't so much matter how you deal with it. It's important that you realize what kind of categorization system you are using and why, and then that you decide whether it's helpful or not. And in order to let you appreciate the narrative stance, I would like you to experiment with these two simple options. I am happy. I seem happy. I seem to be happy. She is happy. She seems happy. She seems to be happy. After seem, both a simple adjective or an infinitive phrase containing an adjective are possible. And please don't run away with the idea that now you need to consult a corpus and create some statistics about whether happy or to be happy is more likely. What I want you to feel is that I seem happy, she seems happy, she seems to be happy, that these have different rhythmic architectures. And you can play with those in different ways. You can, use intonation and word stress in order to create different nuances of meaning. And that's the important thing, not who uses which version, but which version do you need when you write a particular sentence for a particular purpose. Okay, here I have done something that I recommend that I recommend to people. Play with sentences, analyze them, play with them, and your playful versions will probably not be better than the original. Far from it. Your playful versions will help you to build up syntactic muscles and expression muscles, and they often will help you to appreciate the original that much more. So Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. How would I say that nowadays? Emma seemed to be one lucky girl. Emma was one lucky girl, depending on whether I want to go with the link verb or the other, depending on which link verb I want to use. Seemed to be, was, Emma was fortunate in that she had good looks, money, a pleasant personality, a nice home, and a nice family. Again, I'm not offering these as improvements. God forbid that you think that. I'm offering you a way of playing with the language in order to experiment. Okay, here is my version. Emma Woodhouse seemed to be one lucky girl. She was pretty, smart, and rich, and she had a nice home and a pleasant personality. Plus, in the 21 years of her life, nothing really bad had ever happened to her. Now let's compare that again with another version. We could actually scoot the predicate appositives into initial position, and we could experiment with expressing the second clause in different ways. Here's one version. Handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, Emma Woodhouse seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. See, all I've done is that I removed the two predicate appositives from medial position to and placed them in initial position. Now, I did some more stuff in the second sentence. Having experienced very little to distress or vex her, I turned the adverbial into a predicate appositive, and I played it in initial position. And I actually used a participle construction as predicate appositive. So, having experienced very little to distress or vex her, she had lived nearly 21 years in a little town called Hartfield, about 16 miles away from London, or about a 3-hour carriage ride away from London. Note that there's a difference, not structurally, but semantically between these two structures. Now, in a little town called Hartfield is a prepositional phrase as adverbial, actually obligatory adverbial, and then about 16 miles away from London, or about 3-hour carriage ride away from London. Those are prepositional phrases that modify this phrase. So while this, it's one phrase consisting of the main component and then a non-restrictive post-modifier. And if I just say 16 miles, that appeals to people that like to deal in numbers. And it's a little bit more abstract than when I say a 3-hour carriage ride. 3-hour carriage ride focuses on how you get to a place and how long it takes. And the other one is information about, a distance on a map or something. So to me, of course, this about a 3-hour carriage ride gives you more fodder for the imagination, and it reminds you of how people got from places, from A to B, moved around in places. Anyway, again, this is not an improvement on the original. I am playing with the language just to experiment and to build up muscle. Hang on. Oops. What have I done here? I've kept everything the same, but instead of using a participle construction as predicate appositive, I used the very same prep phrase that was used as an adverbial in the initial sentence, and I used it as a predicate appositive. With very little to distress or vex her, she had lived nearly 21 years in a little town called Hartfield. Now, some people would fight over this, whether this is a predicate appositive or an adverbial. I think this speaks, in this sentence here, this structure speaks to Emma. And in the other original sentence, which is right here, this structure speaks to the verb. This is my take on it. Feel free to disagree. All I want to do is make you think, okay? So here's the original, just to get us back to where we started. Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever, and rich, with a comfortable home and happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence, and had lived nearly 21 years in the world with very little to distress or vex her. I always find that after I've played around, analyzed the sentence, dissected it, played with different ways of saying the same thing, I always appreciate the original so much more, and it has so much more depth to me, and I'm so much more aware of what's in it and how it creates meaning. And before I conclude the session, I would like to invite you to become active yourself. And you can do this in 2 different ways. You can try to write a sentence that is perfectly modeled on Jane Austen's sentence. Try to express something else with those exact same structures. The easiest thing is to try to think of a narrative and a persona or a character. Maybe turn this into a male thing. Which adjectives might Jane Austen have used for a man, and would this construction work for a man? Because life for men and women was much different then than it is today. Think about that. So construct a sentence that's modeled on hers, and then go and play in, like I played with it, and see where it gets you. Present the same prepositions in different styles, different registers. And if you want to have a little bit of inspiration of how you can play with register, watch a Jeeves and Wooster episode and see how Jeeves, the way Jeeves talks is so different from the way Bertie Wooster talks. And there's an episode that I will, for which I will put a link in the description box, where Jeeves and Wooster are in America, and the Americans get a great kick out of the way Jeeves speaks. And that can inspire you to experiment with styles and registers. Okay, this was it for today. I hope it helped you. And if you like the way I play with sentences and explain grammar, you might like my book, and you could buy it, or you can book me for a one-on-one session, and I also do group coachings. So visit me on my website and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, and share my stuff with your friends. I would like to welcome you and your friends to become members of my Joy of Syntax tribe. Okay, have fun, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.